Well, hello again guys, and welcome back to the channel. And for those of you who are new, welcome to the channel. I'm here with the Speedy Working Motorcycles SWM RS500R Enduro. Now this is actually the 2022 model, but it is exactly the same as the 2023 model, hence the title SWM RS500R 2023. Because as the dealer told me, they are exactly the same motorcycle this year as they were last year. And may even be the same one next year, I don't know. We'll wait and see, hey. So in today's video guys, we're going to do some on-road work with this bike. We're going to do some very serious off-road work. We're going to do a top speed test, and we're going to do a fuel economy test, and a whole lot more. We're also going to look at what's great in this bike and what's not so great. And trust me, there's a bit of each. So stick around guys, I really hope you enjoy this video. And as usual, if you do, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe down below, and I will see you out there very shortly. Thanks for watching. Alright guys, let's jump right in and we'll talk about the single reason that most of us buy an open class trail bike in the first place, and that is the engine. The SWM RS500R, according to my searches on the internet, produces 55 horsepower and 43 newton meters of torque. It is fuel injected and it does deliver very smooth and consistent power at pretty much any speed. My experience with the bike is I've found that it's got pretty nice mellow power at lower revs, and it's a pretty easy bike to ride at low speed until about mid-range. So if you were looking to sort of buy a bike and you were tossing up between say a 300, a 350 and a 500, well that's pretty much the dilemma I had. I couldn't get a 350 or the 300, I'm not exactly sure which one it was at the time, but I couldn't get one when I ordered this bike, and this one was available with about a 2-week wait, and I thought, yeah, why not? 500cc bikes only go as fast as you twist the throttle in theory, so I thought I'll give it a go. And it's turned out to be a pretty good thing because it is a fairly easy bike to ride. It has got a ton of power, as I've just mentioned earlier, with 55 horsepower. It's definitely no slouch. It will keep up with just about anything in its category for sure, but you really have to screw it on to get that power. It's sort of more in the top end of the rev range rather than sort of down low. So it's a fairly easy bike to ride slow if you want to. So it's a pretty versatile engine in that respect. Cruises really nicely out in the open road at pretty much any speed. It certainly sits on the road quite respectably at 100 kilometres per hour or 60 mile per hour if you're in America or other countries that still use that system. I've ridden this bike quite a bit on the open road and found it's quite smooth. So yeah, it's a very versatile engine, probably a lot more versatile than some of the other brands out there that I've ridden, that's for sure. Yeah, definitely a plus there for the SWM. Next we'll talk about the brakes. The bike comes fitted standard with quality Brembo units front and rear. They are the most progressive and incredibly strong brakes I've ever used. They are super predictable, super easy to use, and at no time did I feel like I was ever going to lock the front wheel up, or the back wheel for that matter, without actually wanting to do it. And that's a great thing on a dirt bike, that's for sure, particularly in really slippery conditions. You need something progressive and predictable. SWM Brembo brakes are just brilliant in that respect. Suspension and handling. Now I'm going to talk about those two together because one really does affect the other a lot on this bike. As anybody that's got even a passing interest in this bike would already know, it's based on the 2010 Husqvarna TE510. Now that's a proven chassis from back in the day. Many years of research and development coming together to produce a motorcycle that's extremely successful in a wide variety of conditions. One of the biggest updates, of course, is the suspension, and it now comes with quality Kyoto units front and rear, with full adjustability for both compression and rebound damping at both ends, with the rear shocker also having the added bonus of high-speed compression damping, just like many of its motocross cousins. The shocks are quite flush and do a really good job of soaking up the small stuff. Big hits are handled really well too. It's surprising what this bike will soak up. Sometimes I found myself looking back at just what I'd ridden over, shaking your head in disbelief. Big gnarly tree roots, rocks, deep ruts, you name it. It just soaks them all up and takes it all in its path. One thing I have found with this bike though is it does seem to be extremely sensitive to clicker adjustment settings. At one stage while the bike was relatively new, I thought I'd back off both the compression and rebound damping at both ends to try and give a little bit more of a compliant ride while the suspension was still bedding in. This turned out to be an absolute disaster as it seriously affected both the handling and stability of the bike, particularly in corners, and I soon put them back to the standard settings. Overall, the suspension and the chassis on this bike complement each other
constitutes a really confidence-inspiring bike to push hard, fast, with really predictable handling. It's surprisingly really good in tight technical riding conditions, just as it is out on the open road or fast sweeping tracks out in the bush or the forest. It really is a great all-rounder. The bike does have excellent ergonomics. Everything feels in just the right position as soon as you climb board. The relationship between the handlebars, the foot pegs and the seat just feels really comfortable and natural. Very light hydraulic clutch, excellent smooth 6-speed gearbox. I've never had a missed shift on the upshift or the downshift of this bike. Easy electric start. Would be nice if it had a Kickstarter, but it doesn't. So take care of your battery maintenance and make sure you've got plenty of juice in there. Otherwise you'll be push starting if you run out.
The bike does have quite a comfortable seat, I've found. Well, for a trail bike that is. But at 965mm, it's right up there. And those of you suffering from Duck's disease could have a bit of an issue. Alright, let's move on to potential issues, as this is a long-term test review on this bike. I will start off, however, by saying that I haven't had any major issues at all with this bike in the 1 year or thereabouts I've owned it, but the minor issues I've had with the bike so far are as follows. First of all, the petrol tank could be bigger. It's 7.2 litres. It's really not big enough for a serious trail bike or a serious trail ride, and you'll probably end up having to carry a bit of fuel with you for extended rides. However, having said that, I'm not too sure whether I'm willing to sacrifice the beautiful ergonomics on this bike for a few extra litres in the fuel tank. There is a plastic fuel cap spacer that fits between the fuel cap and the top of the petrol tank. I think it's more there for decoration purposes than anything else. Do yourself a favour, throw it away immediately. The first time I rode this bike, I went over a series of bumps. I had fuel splashing down my leg because it wouldn't allow the petrol cap to seat properly. Speaking of the fuel cap, it is plastic, as is the petrol tank, and I have found that it is very easy to cross-thread and a frustratingly slow process getting it back in place. Speaking of fuel, also the bike does require 95 octane fuel according to the dealer. Now that's not readily available in a lot of service stations or gas stations, as you guys probably call them over where you come from. Here, so I usually get away with just mixing 98 octane with 91, roughly getting around about the 95% to work pretty well. Alright guys, here we are, service station for the big fuel economy test. This bike has done about 55 kilometres, it's done exactly 55 kilometres of very serious hard off-road riding, keeping up with a couple of Australian off-road champions. So it'll probably be the worst economy this bike could possibly get. So we'll see how much goes into it, because I had a very full tank before I started off, and we'll see how much it takes to fill it. Don't usually use 91, but we haven't got 95 here, so I'll just have to use what they've got. That's exactly where I had it before. It's just taken, well, almost exactly 4 litres, so we'll have to do I'll do the sums on that when we get back home, and I shall put it up on the screen for you. One small drawback with this bike is the high idle speed. You can see I've taken my hand off the handlebar there, the throttle, and we're on pretty flat ground here, so we're still doing around 14-15 kilometres per hour. Personally, I find the high idle speed on this thing to be quite annoying. When you're getting really tight stuff, and I'll just demonstrate on this little row of trees here, is that you really do have to feather the clutch through stuff like that all the time. And if you're doing a lot of really tight sort of riding, you know, up and down rocks, in and out of trees and stuff like that, you're going to get a lot of fatigue in your hand, in your forearm, and it's going to wear you out pretty quickly. So it's just something to be aware of. It's something I thought I'd point out. I've had no issues with the speedo reliability on this bike whatsoever. It's been fantastic so far. Seems to be clear and accurate to read at any speed, which is great. Unlike the beta I had before, which I had to send the unit away after about 1 month because it just was not working properly. Anyway, moving on. You may notice there's a box sitting on top of the seat. Well, there's a good reason for that. That is a replacement rear shock absorber spring. Why is that spring sitting on top of the seat? Well, the other one needs to be replaced. So why does the rear shock absorber spring need replacing? Well, it's not because I'm replacing it because of my weight. It's because the original one lost its tension. I do think that it lost its tension from sitting on the stand, but I can't be 100% certain of that. And I have heard that that could be a possibility, that springs do lose tension if they are not under tension, which means they aren't supporting any weight. So that is definitely a possibility of what has happened here. The bike was sitting on the stand for about 3 months. I came back in, went to take it out for a ride, and immediately noticed that the rear suspension was a lot softer than usual. So I got out my trusty tape measure, checked the static sag and also the ride sag. Now, if you were to buy one of these springs from SWM itself, I think they quoted me $750. Yes, that's a lot of money, isn't it, for something that you didn't expect to happen. Thankfully, the IBAC replacement spring, I think, was about 280 delivered, and they are a quality product, I've been told. They've been around for a long time, that company. As I mentioned earlier, getting the suspension balance right between the front and the rear of the bike is quite important. This bike is really responsive to having a good suspension balance, both steering and handling. So that is the reason why I'm going to change that shock spring immediately, because I've already noticed that the bike really doesn't handle very well. It doesn't corner confidently, and it is almost unsafe to ride as it is right now. I suppose one good thing to come out of it, buying a new shock spring that is, you get free stickers. And who doesn't love free stickers? I know I do. Keep an eye on the spoke tension. Both the front and the rear on my bike did require quite a bit of attention, as most of the spokes were loose to some degree. Particularly if you're riding over rough ground, they will probably come loose, and there will be a bit of a bedding in period before you don't have to do that as often. Also, I did find a couple of the side cover bolts had come loose, but that's pretty normal for most trail bikes. Speaking of bolts coming loose, I did check the handlebar bolts at one stage and found that 2 of them were significantly loose, so keep an eye on those, won't you? Alright, they call this an old school motor. Let's just see how old school it really is. Let's do a speed test, acceleration test. Second gear start, reasonably firm dirt, let's see what you can do. Yeah, that picks up pretty good, eh? Old school by us. Well, pretty safe to assume that we were going to get 170 kilometres an hour out of that. But that was about it, guys. She was topping out that last 10 k's an hour from 60 kilometres an hour to, sorry, that last 10 kilometres an hour from 160 to 170 was coming pretty slow, so yeah, 170 would have seen it out. Standard gearing, standard tyres, well, what's left of the back one. So yeah, pretty good. Quite impressed. Fast enough for just about anywhere in the bush, really. In summary, guys, the SWM RS500R Enduro. Great spread of easy to use power, excellent ergonomics, great brakes, stunning looking bike with sleek lines and eye-catching graphics. It's not too loud, reasonable fuel range in normal conditions, excellent handling and suspension, confidence inspiring, a great all-rounder at a great price. And most important of all, it's just plain good fun. And that's what it's all about. Thanks for watching, guys. That's it for today. See you next time.